Today's lesson is all about scraping data from the internet directly from web pages. Last week, we learned about extracting data from the web using APIs, and we learned about destructuring XML data structures. So it's important to keep in mind that those data structures exist on the web, and usually it's far more efficient to extract data from an API. But not all web pages have APIs. APIs are usually built by developers so that accessing the data for their company is more efficient, and we can take advantage of that. But there may be times when we want to pull data directly from a web page, and that's what we'll work on today. This can be complicated, but with the help of some Python libraries, we can make sense of it. We're going to be using the request library that we used last week. We'll also use a new library called Beautiful Soup, which utilizes the tree structure of HTML to pull out relevant data. In class, we'll be going through a hands-on exercise to get a little more comfortable with the language of the web, HTML and CSS. You can access that exercise right here, but we won't go over it in this video. In this video, I want to get right into some of our code after taking a look at our objectives, what we should be able to accomplish today. So we need to be able to understand HTML and CSS. We are going to review and practice the HTTP requests that we worked on last week, and we'll briefly go over the purpose of web scraping and review some of the legal and ethical considerations. I really encourage you to read over them right here in the notes. We'll learn to import the Beautiful Soup library, and we'll spend some time with some of its functions. It's important to keep in mind that web pages change all the time, and when we're trying to pull data from a web page, we should really take a look at the page itself. And if we're asked to search a web page, we should actually try practicing what we're trying to do with our code in the browser to make sure that things have not changed in a way that could disrupt our programs. Some of the legal and ethical issues mostly relate to cases where data is proprietary. We're going to be working with data that is public. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you're unsure of whether or not it's okay to scrape data from a web page, you should definitely make some kind of connection with the owner of the web page from which you're extracting data, and be open about what you want to do. Usually if you ask first, you'll be able to get permission, especially if you're using the data for educational purposes. Just keep that in mind. But our examples that we do will avoid those situations. We're just going to be looking at public data on the Epicurious site mostly. The tools we'll use are the requests library. It's just called requests, and that's how we basically say hello and goodbye to servers. And remember, servers are the things that contain information that's persistent on the web. The Beautiful Soup library is new. It uses the tag structure of an HTML page to parse the contents. So we'll use the word parse from time to time, and what it just means is we look at a language and we create a data structure from it. We'll mostly be working with tree structures similar to the XML that we worked with last week. You can think of the a sentence as parsing the English language. So the English language has words and syntax, but without being I could say parsed in a sentence, it's really meaningless. So parsing is kind of how we make meaning out of data, by organizing it. We will not use the Selenium library. The Selenium library is similar to Beautiful Soup in its intention, and it's useful for pages that have scripts. Scripts add functionality and interactive components to a web page. And Selenium essentially pretends to be a browser to interact with that web page. But we won't cover that, but you should know that it's there. Yep, so on to Beautiful Soup. It's an HTML or XML parser, mostly HTML because that's the language of the web. Building a data structure from our language. It uses tags, which we did see in the XML, and if you looked through the interactive example, you would have noticed that we have tags. I'll just reference it really quick. A tag usually has an opening, we have an opening tag and a closing tag. So for example, something like a div stands, I think it probably stands for division. It's a way of creating different sections in a web page. And notice it has an opening and a closing tag. So this is just creating a space for us to add some content. And there are classes, which are really important for us because it allows us to, if I'm going to use Beautiful Soup to select some kind of section that I have on a web page, I don't just want to select all of the divs, right? I might want to select one specific div. So the class names are how I make my selections even more specific. And that was evident in the example here. Okay, back to our notes. Okay, so that's pretty much an introduction to what we're going to be doing. And everything we do is going to start with an import of the requests library. Remember, the requests library has a number of functions we can use to extract data from a website. And then the Beautiful Soup library is going to help us, I would say, scrape more specific information from the web page.